This is the iPhone SE 3rd generation, originally released in 2022 and resembling the dated look of the iPhone 6. It's slowly being forgotten about in place of full screen options like the iPhone 13 mini, all the way up to the 15 Pro Max. So is this phone as mighty as Apple claims it is in 2024? Is it worth getting this over all the other new and refurbished options that you can buy? And should you buy this thing over something like the iPhone 13 mini? This is my experience using the iPhone SE in 2024. The iPhone SE is clearly a very dated phone. It's got bezels where we're used to seeing notches, home buttons where we're used to seeing, well, on-screen home buttons. Even comparable phones like the Samsung S23 FE or the Google Pixel 7a, they all have full screens and look much more modern than the SE. Still, there's no denying that overall, this is still a really nice looking phone with nicely curved finished sides, a solid color back, a very small camera bump, and overall it feels really nice to hold. And then turning it on, it's still running the latest OS with some simple modifications like swiping up from the bottom to bring up Control Center and swiping from the top to bring in notifications. But other than that, it's really the same experience you're getting on every other iPhone out there. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. More on that later. So we don't need to go through the complete specs of this thing, but let's start with the obvious. What you're missing if you choose the iPhone SE. There's some obvious ones like the fact that it starts with half the storage at 64 gigs. There's a lack of MagSafe capability, less durable glass on the front and the back, water resistance up to 1 meter instead of 6. But there's more pressing issues that people should be aware of with this phone that might be less obvious right away. The overall size of the phone isn't actually that small in comparison to current iPhones on the market. It's still bigger than the iPhone 13 mini, but small enough to be a one-handed phone. It's actually exactly the same size as the iPhone 6, if you remember that. But the bigger issue here isn't the size overall, it's the screen size. Let me explain. So before everybody jumps out of the woodwork saying the iPhone 6 was this perfect size, and how dare I say anything bad about it, I agree that the iPhone 6 was probably the perfect size. As phones got bigger and bigger, apps, websites, everything was optimized for larger screens. When the iPhone 6 first launched, everything looked great on it because everything wanted to support that new iPhone that everyone was using. But what about in 2024? Well, when first using the SE, I quickly started noticing how apps and the entire operating system really aren't optimized for this screen size. Home icons are highly squished. Notifications have a lot of lines, and so you can really only see one, max two. Websites with ads covering most of the screen. Something about the bezels on the top and the bottom, plus, content everywhere feeling oversized, leaves little room to see more than just one element on screen at a time. Really, the overall impression was that you're peeking into a window instead of viewing the full content. What's more interesting is that the iPhone 13 mini that I just spoke about is smaller than the SE, but the screen goes edge to edge, making it more optimized for content, and it never felt nearly as crammed or like I was peeking into a window. So then you get to the camera. When you compare this thing to something like the iPhone 13 mini, you're only getting one lens instead of two, the 12 megapixel main camera. And then what you're missing is the ultra-wide camera that can zoom out further. It's not a huge deal for basic photography, but it's nice to have, especially when the mini doesn't really cost anything more now. Portrait mode is also available with both, but on the SE, it's only available when a face is detected, and even that is artificially blurred, so it'll look a lot more fake with no option to change the focus later. You're also losing night mode photography with the SE, so this is probably where most trade-offs lie. It's like 10 to 20% worse than the iPhone 13 mini. And that's saying something because it was sort of my baseline for how much battery you need in a day. But what's worse about that is the lack of MagSafe, so you can't use a magnetic power bank, which makes it feel much less doable in daily life. There's also some small quality of life tweaks that are noticeable throughout a longer time with this phone, like the fact that you've got an LCD display instead of an OLED, so it's not as crisp. It's also not nearly as clear as the mini with way less pixels. The max brightness is just 625 nits of brightness, which is a lot harder than most of the current phones to see in direct sunlight. So there's a lot of things here that you are sort of trading off from what a modern phone is. But other than those specific things, this is pretty much the same phone internally as the mini. You're getting an A15 Bionic chip, the same performance chip as the Apple TV 4K, the iPad mini latest gen, and the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus. You're getting 5G cellular, you're getting a lightning port. This phone also takes 4K video, slow-mo videos. Touch ID was also super reliable and something I didn't realize that I was actually missing. All in all, it's a very close competitor to the Mini, and at launch, they were priced differently, making it a bit more of a hard call. But now that you can buy used or refurbished or Amazon renewed, usually for the same price, it makes it much harder to sell the SE for anyone looking to buy the cheapest iPhone available. So I've been using this phone for weeks, and in that time, my goal was to see if I could use the phone in 2024. After so much time with the iPhone 13 mini, I really expected this phone to be great, but I've got to say there are definitely trade-offs. The screen size kept giving me that feeling I was peeking into a window and never really seeing everything that I wanted to see on screen. It overall felt like apps were slowly forgetting about this screen size and optimizing for larger and larger displays instead. Top that with the poor battery performance and the lack of MagSafe charging, and it becomes an even tougher sell for a modern phone. So overall, I can't recommend this phone in 2024. While it works, there's much better options out there like the iPhone 13 or 13 mini, where you can find the same price in many different places, but with a lot of added tech and convenience as well. I think if anything, the SE is ready for an update, with rumors saying one might be coming next year, and if that's true, I hope that they ditch this form factor that they're hanging on to for something that's full screen to remain current with every other iPhone.